Hello and welcome back to Seeing Things Differently. My name is Alicia, and before we get on to our main subject today, I just wanted to draw your attention to our brand new logo and also to this little guy who's going to be our buddy throughout these episodes. So he doesn't have a name yet, and I would really appreciate your help in coming up with something for him. So if you have ideas, why not leave them in the comments below or get in touch on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. My two favourite names will then go in a poll together and I'll be asking you to decide what he should be called. So moving on to today's subject, which is being a carer. I thought it was best to approach this more generally to begin with. So what exactly is a carer? Well, broadly speaking, a carer is someone who looks after or cares for another person. Now, this might be a paid carer, so they might work for an organisation or a company, and their job is to come in and care for somebody else. Or they might be an unpaid carer, and this is typically the category that most people caring for a loved one would fall into. Unpaid carers will usually have other jobs and other activities outside of their caring role as well. So the main job of any carer, whether they are paid or unpaid, is to assist and support someone with the tasks of daily living. And this can be broken down into three different categories. So the first would be helping with practical tasks. And this means perhaps making dinner, doing the laundry, making sure the house is nice and tidy, or even just making a cup of tea or coffee for someone. It's usually quite easy to get outside help with the practical tasks because it's relatively easy to ask a friend, a neighbour, or even another family member to give you a hand with these tasks of daily living at home. So the second part of caring for somebody would come down to personal care. Now, personal care would include things like helping your loved one to get dressed, helping them to shower or bathe, and possibly even to use the bathroom depending on what their illness is. Now, this requires quite a high level of maturity and sensitivity. If you think that it's awkward for you having to help somebody with these tasks, imagine how they must be feeling. And there are different ways to approach personal care. It's really about finding a way that works for you. You might find that some people prefer that you be open and laugh and have a joke with them. Make it light-hearted and not something that's very intense and potentially quite awkward. Other people might prefer that you actually just get the job done as swiftly and quickly as possible so as they're not feeling uncomfortable for an extended amount of time. And as I've said, this is completely down to you and the person you're caring for, and you can really only work this out by having a conversation with them. There are lots of different tips and advice services online that can give you ideas for how to talk to someone and how to help someone directly with their personal care, particularly for people with dementia who might prefer that you actually stay right in their midline of vision instead of standing to the side or trying to stay out of the way. It's important to let them know that you're there for them throughout the whole process. And lastly, we have the third point, which is emotional support. So this is pretty self-explanatory. It really is just making sure that you give the person that you're looking after a space to talk to you if they need it. Give them a big hug or sit with them and hold their hand while they watch a film. Just being next to somebody and being able to provide them that emotional support can do wonders for their mental health and how they're feeling, as well as making you feel good for being able to help somebody. I think the emotional support can sometimes be one of the most pleasurable parts of being in a caring role. So now that we've covered exactly what a carer does and what the different parts of their job might involve, I think it's important that we look at the differences between adult carers and young carers. Now, young carers will fall into that category of unpaid carers, as I mentioned earlier, because they will typically be looking after a loved one, like a parent, maybe a grandparent, and potentially even a sibling. So, what is a young carer? Well, a young carer is somebody under the age of 18. They're probably still at school or college, or maybe doing an apprenticeship, but anyhow, they will be still in education and probably thinking about their future and what they'd like to do with their own career and their own life. Now, it's estimated that there are 700,000 young carers in the UK. And of course, not all of these carers look after somebody with rare dementia or even just dementia, but it gives you a good idea of just how many other people out there might be in a similar situation to you. It also means that there are quite a lot of useful resources for young carers. So I've linked a few of those in the description below if you want to go and check them out. Now, as we discussed last week, being a carer of any kind can be really challenging and difficult, and being a young carer can definitely have an impact while you're growing up. So I know for me, I felt that I had to mature really quickly and take on almost a parent role at times. Trying to balance my school life with my social life and then also my caring role could sometimes be really tricky and impossible to do. It's not easy as a young person while your brain is still developing to be learning and absorbing all this knowledge and then also trying to care for somebody and manage your social time as well. Now, young carers typically don't have any big financial commitments to worry about, like mortgages or paying any bills, but around the age of 16 to 18, I noticed a lot of my friends were getting jobs in order to make money that they could spend when we'd go out for social activities. Now, for me, it wasn't just thinking about, do I want to get a job? It was thinking about, do I actually have the ability to manage a job on top of everything I'm already doing? I did actually decide to take a job. I worked at a theme park and then at a cinema because I'm quite extroverted, and I found that those jobs actually gave me a really good way to have some scheduled, structured time away from my caring role where I was doing something productive that wasn't school and also having a lot of social interaction. Now, for other people, this might not work, or they might not be able to get jobs. I was fortunate enough that my younger brother was able to stay home and care for dad if mum wasn't there and if I was at work. So we had some options, though I understand that that's not the case for everyone. So again, it really is thinking about what is best for you and for your family and situation. So around that age as well, there can be a real struggle for independence as you find young people wanting to develop their own identities. They'll have their own likes and dislikes, perhaps a different taste in music, and they'll just be developing as a person. So it's important at this stage that you try to find balance and accommodate each other as a support network or as a family. It's okay for you to actually say, I can't do this job right now, or I don't feel that I am caring to the best of my ability, or just to simply ask for some time off, whether that be a week, a couple of days, or maybe even just a few hours to yourself. There is nothing wrong with expressing that to people. What is most important is that you don't burn out. Now, burnout is when you keep trying to balance and push through everything, even though you're feeling exhausted. And this can just lead to incredible fatigue, so lots and lots of feeling tired, a disinterest in things that might have previously engaged you, and sometimes it might also affect your mental health as well. And this is why it's really important to reach out and talk to somebody. I know that when I was a bit younger, I found it really difficult to discuss with my mother that I was finding it hard to care because I didn't want to put the additional burden on her. She was already losing her husband in a sense, and I was very aware of that. So I didn't want her to know that I was struggling too. But actually, having spoken to her years later, we've both agreed that things would have been better for all of us if we had had a much more open and engaged conversation to understand what the other person needed. We would have been able to perhaps step in a bit more and fill the roles of each other to make a complete unit of care. Now, I understand that for some young people who are caring for a loved one without their other parent present, and perhaps also without the support of other siblings or family members, this is even more difficult, and this isn't even an option for you to actually be able to speak to the other parent. However, this is where it's really, really important for you to tell the other people who are involved in your life. For example, let your best friend know. Perhaps talk to them about what it's like for you at home. You might find that it's a difficult conversation to begin with, but if they're a good friend, then I'm sure they'll understand, and I'm very sure that they will want to do their best to be a good friend to you and support you. Another great thing you can do is talk to your teachers. Make them aware of what's going on at home. This will make it much easier for them to understand perhaps why your homework was a little bit late, why you might be feeling really tired in class, or why you've maybe not done a piece of work to the best of your ability. Letting people know is paramount, or really, really important, in making sure that you have the right support around you. And if you're a bit nervous or scared in how to ask for support, why not just share this video with your teachers or your friends or even your family members? Let me do the explaining for you, and that way they'll already know what a young carer is, and all you have to do is tell them that you're a young carer as well. Now, you'll probably have noticed that the lighting has changed, and that is because I have a tendency to try and film these videos just as the sun is setting and the light is constantly changing. So that's noted for next time not to do that. But back to the subject. So obviously support locally will vary depending on where you're based, and even varies across the UK. So I can't imagine how much it varies from country to country. But if you are in the UK, I definitely think it's worth contacting your local council. You can let them know that you're a young carer, and as well as having groups available that you can attend and talk to other young carers, they might also be able to offer you a carer's allowance. Now, I got this when I was about 16 or 17, and what it entitles you to is, I think, £20 or £30 every couple of weeks. Now, this money, or the intention behind this money, is that you will use it to do something for yourself that provides a little bit of respite. So respite meaning a break from your caring role. For me, I used to use that money to book into a nail salon and go and spend half an hour, 40 minutes getting my nails done and just sitting quietly. I could talk to the nail technician if I wanted to, or I could just sit peacefully with my thoughts. But she was aware of my situation at home, and I would pay at the end and then be given a receipt, which I would send to the council, and they would give me that money back, making sure that I had a little bit of time, even if it was only 30, 40 minutes, to myself each couple of weeks. And I definitely think that this made me a better carer, because I felt almost regenerated, and that I'd had some time outside of the situation and was able to come back into it feeling a little bit rested and a bit fresher. As a carer for someone with rare dementia, I think one of the hardest challenges is probably going out in public and being in social situations. Now, I'm aware that that sounds pretty strange, but what I mean is, my dad would sometimes approach strangers while we were out and try to have conversations with them as if he knew them, which of course they would be very confused. And for them to see a parent and a child together, but the parent is the one that's behaving strangely, is something that a lot of people struggle to grasp. If people aren't familiar with the concept of a young carer, they might actually not believe that you're caring for your parent. I know I've had that situation a few times where I've explained that I'm looking after my father, he's not well, can you just be a bit more patient with him, or please could you not speak to him like that? And people dismiss me and brush me off as if I don't know what I'm talking about, and just assume that my father's odd behaviour is because he is an odd person and not because there is something wrong with his brain. I know from friends as well that it can be really, really challenging, particularly if you're caring for somebody with frontotemporal dementia, because a lot of their behaviours won't necessarily fit within what's socially acceptable or normal. And you can end up with people getting quite angry or quite agitated with you when your parent isn't listening to something you're trying to explain to them. For example, asking them to sit down on a long flight or a train journey, and they just won't do it. The staff might be getting annoyed saying that the seatbelt sign's on and they have to sit down and they have to do this, but they don't realize that they're actually adding to the stress of the situation and making it much, much harder for you to do your job as a carer. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what you can do in those situations other than try to really express to people that the person isn't well and that they need to allow you to do your caring role rather than trying to interfere. But another great thing you might want to do is encourage the person you're looking after if they're still competent and able to make that decision themselves, or actually just print one for them, but get a little badge or a card that indicates to people that something is not quite right. For dementia, they might also be able to use the little sunflower lanyard. I know that that's accepted in a lot of shops across the UK, a lot of supermarkets. They'll know what that means. They'll be a lot more patient with you and with the person that you are caring for. So now that we have been through what a carer does and some of the differences between a young carer and an adult carer's role, I wanted to share with you what being a carer means to me personally. So this might not be applicable for everybody, and that's perfectly okay. We all have really, really different experiences of this situation. But I've thought long and hard about this, and for me, being a carer means a lot of things, and I'd like to go through them one by one. So the first is sacrifice. Being a carer means a lot of sacrificing the things that you would really love to do. It means saying no to things even if you actually really did want to say yes. For example, if I want to go to a party, but there's nobody else at home to care for dad because mum's perhaps working abroad and my brother might have already had plans or he's not feeling up to caring that evening, then I'm not going to be able to get anybody else in to look after my dad, and I have to remember that he is the priority. He's the one that needs the care and attention, and it's my job to make sure that I'm there. So sacrifices are necessary. But as we discussed earlier, if you have a good group of friends who understand this, then ask them if they can try and work their social activities around your schedule. The next thing that comes to mind when I think about being a young carer is strong emotion, and this can be positive or negative. I know for a long period I was very resentful and angry and upset with the situation. Of course, never with my father or my family, but with the situation itself, because I felt like I'm a teenager. I should be going out. I want to be hanging out with my friends. I want to go to the park when they're going to the park. I want to be able to go to the cinema with them at the drop of a hat. So I got quite frustrated at the fact that every time I wanted to do something, there was this huge process and lots of steps to go through in making sure that dad was cared for before I could actually say yes to anything. But in the same breath, some really strong positive emotions come out as well. I know that for me, there have been moments of overwhelming joy and happiness, and situations that, even though they're not quite what we expected, have ended up being really, really fun. When you're able to take a step back and just laugh at some of those awkward or potentially embarrassing situations that you might have been in, things become so much lighter, and you really do develop this positive outlook of thinking, it's quite fun to be a carer. There's a lot that you get to experience that other people won't until they're much, much older. I think in terms of an example of a positive emotion, I just remember feeling so incredibly happy when my parents came up to visit me while I was living in Edinburgh, which is where I studied for university. They came to visit at the time of the Christmas markets, as my birthday's in December. And my dad was kind of a bit docile, not really engaging much with us, but more sort of just following us around the park. It was very crowded, very busy, and lots of people. So I imagine it was quite overwhelming for him. But then he asked if he could go on a big ride that spins round really fast. And it just wasn't something that I think any of us were really expecting to happen. We had to double check with him that he knew what he was asking to do, because we weren't sure if he'd gotten himself confused or if he potentially thought he was looking at something different and didn't in fact want to get on the ride. You know, we didn't want to strap him into a big roller coaster if he in fact wanted to just go and get a hot chocolate. So it turns out he did really want to go on this ride, and I think my aunt went with him, and my mum and I had already been on it, so we were just watching them. But it turned into the best afternoon imaginable, and it really did come out of nowhere. We thought it was going to be just an average day and nothing special, and it really turned out to be just one of the most memorable things that I can think of when I think of my dad, really. The next thing that comes to mind when I think about being a carer is strength. And mainly I mean emotionally and mentally, but also physically sometimes, because my father was a lot bigger than I am, and it's very difficult to get somebody dressed when they're much, much bigger than you and they don't necessarily want to cooperate. But aside from that, it's very important that you are strong mentally. You have to be able to deal with a lot. And it doesn't mean that if you're not in that place right now, you won't be. I certainly wasn't very strong for a long time. I used to break down and cry and get upset for long periods of time. And I found it really hard. I found it difficult to talk to people. I didn't fully understand the situation myself. And so it wasn't easy for me to be very strong. But that is something that comes with age. And if you're not there now, please trust that you will be eventually. You'll learn the things that you need that support you in being a good carer. And you'll learn what things to avoid and what actually makes you feel worse. And I think it's just so wonderful that so many young people out there have this beautiful skill at such a young age. Being thoughtful, kind, and loving are also amazing traits that I think pretty much every carer has. The ability to put somebody else's needs completely ahead of your own is just something that blows my mind every day. Even though I've been in that position, I still look at other carers and hear stories from other people who look after their loved ones and just think, wow, what an amazing job you're doing. And so remind yourself of that. Now, the next thing that comes to mind when I think about being a carer is patience. And I'm sure this is a big one for any carers out there, particularly when caring for somebody with dementia or a rare dementia. It can be pretty frustrating to perhaps repeat instructions over and over again before somebody follows them. But you really have to remember that this is not the person, this is the illness that you're talking to at that point. You know, my dad would have had no problem following instructions when he was healthy, but obviously as his posterior cortical atrophy progressed, he wasn't so able to follow instructions, and even things like making himself a cup of tea became quite challenging for him in terms of being able to follow the steps and being able to actually locate the items that he would need to complete the task. So you need to be very, very patient and understanding, and not just take for granted that, oh, they can still do it, they're just being difficult. Trust me, they're not. They might not actually even want your help, but they're having to ask for it because they can no longer do this by themselves. And finally, when I think about what being a carer means to me, there is one big overarching theme or idea that comes to mind. And we've touched on it already, but that is maturity. That is what being a carer means to me. But as I said, everybody has different experiences. For me, it meant all of these different things here, completely wrapped up in a big theme of maturity and having to grow up really quickly. Caring for anybody is a really admirable thing to do. And as we all know, it can come with quite a big set of challenges sometimes. So it's really, really important that you take care of yourself. Remember to check out the links in the description if you want a little bit of support, and remember to reach out as well. During the pandemic, I'm sure it's been incredibly difficult for a lot of carers. People haven't been able to get the additional support or respite that they so desperately need. If you're finding it hard to express to others what being a carer is, no matter how old you are, then please share this video and let me do the explaining for you. Make sure you reach out to friends, family members, or teachers if you are struggling. And if you don't feel that you want to talk to any of those people, then why not reach out to me? I'd always be happy to hear from you. And you can contact me via my email address or on any of our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Finally, to wrap up this episode, I would love for you to share with me what being a carer means to you. You can send me just one word, a sentence, or even a whole story in paragraphs if you want. I would love to be able to share some of your caring experiences and what being a carer means to you on the next episode. If you'd like to remain anonymous, that's not a problem at all. Just make sure you let me know that when you send in your experience. Don't forget to suggest names for our little buddy here, as he will be joining us for all future episodes of Seeing Things Differently. Remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed what you saw today. Share this video with anyone you think that might benefit from it, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with new videos coming out. Thank you so much for being here, and see you all again next time.